Hello again, everybody. It's your old pal, Guardian Enzo, coming to you live on tape from beautiful Higashiyama, Kyoto. And I'm here, as always, joined, well, not here, but I am joined, as always, by my esteemed co-host. I don't know why he's so esteemed all the time. He should calm down. It's Samu, and he joins us from lovely London in UK. How are you doing there, Samu?
Hello, hello. I'm doing good. I'm going to be Sam today, talking about Dandadan. So you can be, I was going to say Enzo on Zozodan.
And
No, doesn't work.
Enzizo, yes. That's right. Spoiler, it's Dandadan. It's the Dandadan episode. And this feels like one that's been a long time coming because this is obviously one of the biggest and most popular anime properties of the last few years. Certainly a kaiju at this point, and one that we've both been kind of in on since the beginning when we were talking it up as a next big thing candidate. So,
Yeah.
yes, we are finally gotten around to talking about Dandadan. And Dandadan, for those of you, both of you that don't know, it's by Yukinobu Tatsu, who is the one of the many assistants to Fujimoto, who's gone on to have great success on their own. Endo-sama of the Spy Family is another one, but yes, the number of Fujimoto influenced properties or directly Fujimoto properties that are in the top 10 Oricon sales any given month is quite astonishing, really. Um, and that is one of the things we'll talk about. But yeah, Dandadan is really a piece of work, boy. I'll tell you. It's one of the most unique battle shonens, action shonens out there, in that it really has just a complete abandon and kitchen sink approach to how it deals with plot. Basically, if you can think of any Western or Japanese mythology or science fiction based idea, there's a pretty good chance that Dandadan will get to it sooner or later, often all at the same time. It is a pretty wild ride, that's for sure. It starts out with a girl who's very interested and involved with ghosts and such, and a boy who's very interested in UFOs and such. Both of them are ironically skeptics about the other's passion, and that buds into something bigger, which buds into something bigger, which bugs into something very big. And I don't feel like Dandadan probably needs a lot of explanation at this point, but there are probably still a few of you out there who have neither seen or read it. So that's kind of where it starts. The girl is Momo Ayase, and the boy is Takakura Ken, but everyone calls him Okarun. And she has a thing for the actor Takakura Ken, who's a real person, and so she can't bear to call him that, so she calls him Okarun, and then pretty soon everyone's doing it. Um, so before we get into the kind of point by point discussion of this global phenomenon that is Dandadan, do you have any general thoughts on this series that you want to jump in with?
Yeah, like you, I've been reading it since the beginning of when it came out, and I could see the future that it would have. So seeing that manifest with the anime adaptation is not surprising. I've watched a little bit of the anime. I liked it a lot. I have mixed feelings on the manga, which really just changes week by week. So yeah, we're probably going to touch on some like highlights and low points as well. But I think it also is interesting to cover. It's noteworthy to cover like the Fujimoto like backstory side of things as well. I think that's part of the series' core identity.
Absolutely, and I think that's a good place to start. And to be clear, I would never mistake this for a Fujimoto series in reading it, because sort of a it has a very different sort of tone to it than a Fujimoto series would have. Just like I would never, for example, uh, I would never have mistake Spy Family for a Fujimoto series. That said, um, I think you can see more of his DNA in Dandadan than you can in Spy Family, I would argue. And I'll throw out a question for you. I was originally going to ask, is this the best of the next gen Fujimoto series? But I will ask you, is this the best of the Fujimoto or next gen Fujimoto series? Now I know you're going to say Chainsaw Man is better, but then I'll let you also ask this question: is this the biggest hit of the Fujimoto family at this point? Is it bigger than any? Is it bigger than Spy Family? Is it bigger than Chainsaw Man now? What do you think?
Okay, before I answer that, probably good to lay out who is the Fujimoto family if we're talking about that. We're basically
Sure.
talking about who we have here with Dandadan. A new up and comer one is Centuria. That's Toru
Yes,
Kurumori.
absolutely.
That's one in
Very
Jump Plus.
buzzy.
Yes, indeed. That's one in Jump Plus that is quite an up and comer, but relative to the others, very new. You have Tatsuya Endo, obviously, Spy Family. And you also have Yuji Kaku, who did Hell's Paradise. So those are the series that they
Which is
did.
also a pretty big hit, to be fair.
Yeah, it is. It is. So those are all series that they did post being assistants to Fujimoto. It is worth noting. It's not like they went to the school of Fujimoto and then Fujimoto taught them how to be mangaka. What is what is most fun, I think, to think about this dynamic, because a lot of them were around during like Fire Punch era, like quite early on his first serialization. For example, with Dandadan here with Yukinobu Tatsu, I believe he was the assistant for the entire run of Fire Punch. So I do see the influence there coming through, maybe more so even than something like Chainsaw Man. Um, so yeah, you have these multiple people with hits post their time with Fujimoto. Fujimoto is actually younger than all of these authors,
Yes.
so it's not like and I believe, if not all of them, most of them had careers already or had like some sort of like already a serialization, already one shots. They were in some ways maybe ahead of him in terms of timeline, but as things went, their time with him clearly had some influence, and there's some like connective tissue between all of them. So no, it's not like Fujimoto like taught them how to be mangaka. These are like Loki, his seniors who helped him out, and he is like the driving force of this little collective that seems to have like sprouted from him. And there's very others that haven't become big names but are like assistants that we can keep an eye on, which is why I mentioned Centuria. That could be one that reaches that level. My answer is I do think of all of those people, grouping them together, I think Tatsuki Fujimoto is the best of them. I think Look Back and Chainsaw Man are the best of them. And even if I was to compare the assistants of Fujimoto, if I was to say in popularity, no, I still think Spy Family is more popular than Dandadan. And if I was to say in terms of quality, I think Hell's Paradise is better than both of them. Um,
Interesting.
so that's where I put Dandadan relative to them, which sounds negative, but it's not that negative in the grand scheme of things. I think they're all popular, successful, and at times quite good series.
Okay, fair enough. I actually think uh, I would still, on balance, because it has such a wide demographic reach, give Spy Family the edge in terms of popularity. But I do think Dandadan has exploded in a really dramatic way, and I think the anime being so good had a lot to do with that. I personally think of all the Fujimoto family of series, while I do love Sayonara Eri, I actually probably prefer Dandadan even to Chainsaw Man myself, but I understand that I probably haven't gotten to the best part of Chainsaw Man yet. So once the Reze film, once I see that, and once the next season comes out, that may change my view. But it is undeniable, and as you say, it's fascinating because he is younger than most or all of these assistants who have gone on to be successful. There's no question that for whatever reason, whether it's his teachings or not, there is an absolutely uncanny congregation of extreme success coming out of his family tree. It's really quite astonishing for a mangaka as young as he is.
I think it's
You know,
I, I think what plays into this is we've touched on it in previous episodes. It may have been a Bleach episode or something where we talk about um, even from past few decades, if you go into Jump specifically, you can see the line of who is an assistant to who, and then how did that create the next generation of Jump creators and these big
I was
names.
going to mention Toriyama specifically as someone who had like a shit ton of assistants who then went on to become mentors to other assistants. So
Exactly. Yeah, you can track that from him to now, and that is still ongoing. Whereas Tatsuki Fujimoto is completely outside of that sphere. He has his own perspective, and I think when Chainsaw Man, when his like series came out, you did see a shift, I think, in some people who were trying to emulate his art style, his approach to his stories. I remember when Yusei Matsui,
Matsui, yeah, yeah,
yeah, when Yusei
Matsui.
Matsui was doing he was doing a competition for Jump, I believe, where it was like up and comers and newcomers, and I think he made some comment along the lines of everyone's trying to copy Fujimoto, everyone's trying to do Chainsaw Man. So I think the influence is really real there, and I do think that often seems to channel into popularity.
I think one of the reasons the influence was so real among like people doing one shots and stuff is because these people who love manga, who are normally people who draw it, love it, were reading Chainsaw Man and thinking, "Wow, this is fucking cool." And I don't think it has to go deeper than that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think that's a series that if you're a young manga artist, you read that thing and you say, "Man, this is fucking cool." And so it doesn't surprise me. And then when it started to be really successful, well, hell, giddy up, as Kramer from Seinfeld would say. There's no reason not to. Um, yeah. So I mean, good on him, first of all. And I mean, if he wasn't a good boss, I kind of doubt so many of his assistants would have gone on to be that successful. I have no idea what the relationship was like, but I've never heard anyone complain for what that's worth. Um, Let's talk about anime versus manga because I know you said you haven't watched much of the anime for Dandadan. I have a very particular and very strong opinion on this, which is that the anime is better than the manga, and I think the anime is the definitive version of Dandadan. And there are a couple of reasons for that. The first of all being, I think that the sheer frenetic, relentless energy that Dandadan undeniably brings to the table, whatever else you think of it, I think it's even more infectious and even more exhilarating in anime form than it is in manga form. And I think Science Saru, who had a bit of a mixed track record going into this and a bit of a mixed reputation too in terms of working conditions and such, but that's a topic for another show. They really surpassed my expectations with this. And what I found honestly is at a certain point the manga it wore me out. I just was like I just grew exhausted with kind of different but the same stuff happening every arc, every chapter. And I never, at least not yet, have gotten to that point with the anime. It may be because you wait a year between seasons or whatever, but I don't have that sense of exhaustion with the anime. The anime has stayed fresh with me, has stayed exhilarating with me longer, and I haven't reached. It hasn't gone past its best by date the way the manga did, and that's just being honest. And that's not to say I dislike the manga, but it doesn't have the same appeal to me that it did because it just started to feel very repetitive, and I just kind of I did grow weary with it. So, based on what you have seen of the manga, do you have any thoughts, Samu, on the anime versus manga versions of Dandadan?
I feel like I would probably be in a similar position as you. I was really impressed, especially with the first episode. I think I watched maybe 4 episodes, so I didn't even get what to Ira's arc, which I saw from online reception was really, really highly regarded.
It was
Um,
great.
yeah, so whereas when I think about that in the manga, it doesn't stick out to me too
Yes,
much.
exactly, exactly.
So that's why I'm curious, like, oh, how different an experience is that? Yeah, that's just me being not super good at following ongoing anime. It is one that I think I will probably catch up with. I've heard season 2 is just as good, if not even better than season 1 as well.
No, I think that's pretty true.
Yeah, I think it probably the sheer nature of it being animated lends itself to creating the highs and lows in pacing and tone that sometimes the manga feels a bit washed out on. I just feel like I'm with you. Sometimes the manga is relentless. I'm like, yes, these are really impressive double spreads of all this action happening, and the level and detail that we're getting for a weekly serialization is actually crazy. Like, I can't. You have to give Yukinobu Tatsu credit that he's able to do this. However, system he is operating to achieve this is wild, but is kind of a strange thing of like when you get so used to that happening all the time, it loses the impact of it. And sometimes I just when it's chapter after chapter, page after page of just an assault on the eyes of everything happening, it becomes nothing almost. And what I did notice was that anime did a good job of simplifying things and adding like a dynamic quality to the animation that
Mm.
maybe sacrificed the amount of things happening on the page or on the screen, but it gave a focus that probably helps to like not be like fatiguing to experience. That's my
And it also uses music in a very very effective way to sort of amplify the impact of the action sequences.
hmm.
And not just traditional anime music either, like classical stuff. And it really is interesting in the way it uses music to kind of make that embellish that experience.
I've heard as well that even the voice acting really is really impressive for this series.
It's great. Yeah,
And I've
it
even
is.
saw a couple of times the dub like having a few viral moments on Twitter, like the stuff between Okarun and Gigi. Yeah, so it seems to be just as a production doing everything right.
Exactly. It's just one of those productions that is getting everything right. It has some great actors in very, very funny supporting roles like Seki Tomokazu as the Dover Demon and stuff like that. And I'm not a huge Hanai Natsuki fan generally. I tend to think his performances tend to be pretty samey, but I do think he really Okarun is his tour de force. And I just have to say Wakayama Shion is great as Momo. She really is. She really nails that character. I mean, she's wonderful. But let's talk about Momo a little bit because uh, there is a certain syndrome which I did see some fans react negatively to from time to time, specifically with a point which I guess we'll discuss it when we get to the spoiler section. But it is even somewhat from the first chapter of the series. You do get quite a fair amount of fan servicey stuff with Momo, Momo's Peaches, if you will. She's yeah. Do you find you've read enough of the manga to certainly to determine whether you have an opinion on this? I do find that although Momo is a strong and interesting and smart girl, and to the credit of to the credit of Yukinobu, he presents her that way. There is a lot of objectification of her physically, to the point where it sometimes does bother me. Did that ever happen with you?
I think I mean I remember when the first episode came out, that was definitely a point of contention of it was reaching people who were not familiar with the series, or in the case of Dandadan, I think because it has such a broad appeal, there are like those who don't necessarily even follow anime that much or watching it. And there was definitely a shock of like, oh, especially the first episode, how she was depicted. My memory casting back reading this for like 4 years now is yes, that first chapter, first episode equivalent was quite strong in terms of the fan service and the objectification of Momo. And then I do feel like it kind of died down for a while. And
Yeah,
it doesn't feel like a core like presentation of her characters. So I don't think it actually detracts her to a great degree. And maybe this is just a case of being so familiar with anime and manga that compared to other things out there, this feels like very low in terms of like fan service. But yeah, there's been more moments as time has gone on, but I don't think it's ever been as shocking as like the first chapter was presented, which was like maybe a mistake, but was it because it still managed to be the success it is?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I don't think we
uh,
can call it a mistake.
I just think it was maybe that first chapter is not 100% tonal representation of the series itself, which happens with these long ongoing titles anyway.
Yeah, yeah, it's not. But the thing I would say is that there's a lot of when the incidents with her happen, I find some of them to be kind of needlessly crass, if you will. Like
Yeah,
not just innocently etchy, like in not like innocently etchy in like in like a Rumiko sort of way, but like just kind of needlessly like more kind of leering
pervy.
and crass. Yeah, kind of middle-aged man sensibility, kind of fan service, that I just find as a middle-aged man to be kind of crass and unappealing. And it doesn't happen that often, but there are occasional moments. One at a hot spring comes to mind for me that just it just they rub me the wrong way. No pun
Hmm.
intended. And yeah. So there is that. So let's talk then about another thing which I want to talk about before we get into the spoiler section, which is what I call the golden Kamuy effect. And longtime readers of LIA know that one of the things I love to say about Golden Kamuy. Well, I love a couple things I love to say. One of them is there's nothing in the world like a Golden Kamuy episode, and another is that every character in Golden Kamuy acts like they're the main character of their own series. And I find that to be somewhat true with Dandadan too. You take somebody like Kinta, who we basically emerges as a character in what is the second season of the anime. I couldn't tell you what chapter it is, but relatively late in the story. And immediately, as soon as Kinta becomes a part of the story, he immediately begins to behave as if he is the protagonist in a very literal way. But you have a lot of characters who do this, who really have this incredible sense of self confidence and possessive and very self possessed, who really act like Ira is another example, perfectly, of course. It's literal with her too, but even like Turbo Granny, and there's all these characters. Every character in the series acts as if they're the main character of the series. And I think it works very well, like for example in Golden Kamuy, because Golden Kamuy it moves around from setting to setting a lot, and you have different characters who will take the center stage for extended periods of time. And when their little subsection of the cast is in focus, that benefits it because all these characters carry themselves as if they should be the protagonist of the story. Do you think that works as well in Dandadan, or do you think that there are times where that becomes part of that cacophony of noise that can sometimes be a little overwhelming, at least in manga form?
I mean, I think it's quite a common piece of advice that is given to writers that for your side characters, it's good to treat them as if they are the main character of their own story that fits within the narrative. I suppose it's just getting that balance of not having them overtake what like the series is actually supposed to be focusing on. Because Dandadan has so many arcs where it feels like it just like resets and something new happens, and there's some different cast of characters are involved each time. So there at least is some variety in terms of who gets the focus each time. I agree that Kinta does stand out as the character who like thinks he's the main character, even though afraid to say it. Of all the like the growing, recurring, main supporting, whatever you want to call them, cast, he's probably still my least favorite. Um, but yeah, for everyone else that gets introduced, they have something that does make them stand out, which I think is probably no, I think that's a good thing. I think Dandadan does that on balance pretty well.
I would agree. I think on balance, it's a good thing. It may be you're right. It may be advice to writers and a good advice, but I think very few of them are able to manifest it as comprehensively as Noda Satoru and Yukinobu Tatsu do. Because I watch, as you know, a lot of anime, and of course, I read a lot of manga. And the two series that really where that syndrome stands out to me the most are Golden Kamuy and Dandadan, probably. Um, let's talk about side characters. As long as we're talking about side characters, let's talk about side characters that are personal favorites of ours. And it's certainly a wide and varied and dynamic cast to choose from in Dandadan terms. So you pick one, I'll pick one. Let's do that. So let's each pick a couple. Who are some side characters here? Who's a side character you really like?
My favorite character is Gigi. Him being presented as like the hot, pretty boy who everyone should love, and him being the childhood friend of Momo, and what that feeling that stirs in Okarun, and the dynamic that they have. He's like such a bro, and like incredibly stupid, and like just like
Yeah,
endearing.
he's a goof. He's a goof.
On appearance, he seems like the type of character that would be like the villain of, if this was just like a school series, he would represent what Okarun doesn't like, or doesn't want to be, and he would be in such conflict. But just allowing him to uh, have that while also just being such a goof, um, is always entertaining. I think any chapter, any scene where he's involved, uh, I'm laughing. I'm on board, and I like where he sees himself within the relationship of Okarun and Momo. There are some moments where I feel like we're being pushed towards not really a triangle per se, but flirting with this idea of like, oh, look what Momo could also have if it wasn't Okarun. But I think
Mm.
Gigi is very aware of where things stand between everyone, and he doesn't want to have that overlap with Okarun. And he's just a good guy. I really like him.
Yeah, I actually think Gigi is probably mostly an intentional deconstruction of that trope. I think he's quite intentionally set up as being someone who appears to be that, and then in reality is someone who's like totally different from that.
Hmm.
And I also like the fact that, you know, initially Okarun really kind of does resent him for all the reasons that you would expect a character like Okarun to resent a character like Gigi in a manga. And over time, he comes to like I can't dislike this guy. You know,
Yeah.
he is such a bro. And that's something about Okarun too, actually, who, you know, we kind of know all along is a good guy, but he's willing to, you know, say, you know, I was wrong. You know, I totally misjudged this guy. You know, and so I think that's good for both of them. I'm going to jump in and say Vamola,
Yeah.
Vamola. I love Vamola. She has a great backstory. It's one of my favorite arcs, but also just I love Vamola for who she is because I just think she is such an inherently funny character. I mean, just the way she presents herself and the way she communicates and her facial expressions. She's just a complete random. She's a goof in a completely different way than Gigi is a goof, but she is still a goof. And I just think I mean, she's adorable too, but and Gigi's adorable too, but I think Vamola is just like, she makes me laugh consistently, but I also care about her. And I think she's a really interesting addition to the whole mix. And of course, you know, this being a series that it is, of course, she's going to have feelings for Okarun. That's not much of a spoiler. But so that side of it is kind of interesting too.
It doesn't feel
Uh,
serious. It doesn't. It's not gonna.
no, it doesn't. And she's not the only one, of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, Vamola is great. I love Vamola. She's maybe my favorite. It's tough to say because there's so many good side characters here, but I really do love her.
I agree. I think her backstory really sells everything, like the full package of her character, and like establishes as arcs go on how she just is able to do more. Let's say that she's able to
Mm.
communicate more. She's kind of like, I think of like Casca from Berserk, kind of, but done in a completely different way. Kind of touches on similar like troubles and horrible things that she's had to go through, and how that affects her ability to communicate. And but through the Dandadan lens, it's quite different tonally. Yeah, I really like her as well. I will say Ira is a character that, from being a manga reader pretty much only, I don't care for her. So I'm very curious if the anime adaptation will adjust that.
I'm curious too. They did a phenomenal job adapting her backstory, which is where I think all that buzz came from.
Okay, 'cause she's
I
very
will.
popular now.
Yeah, she's very popular. She's not among my favorites.
Hmm.
Even after the anime, I don't like her that much. But yes, the anime certainly did a great job of fleshing out her character better than the manga did. All
Okay,
right, you want to
I
name
think
another one?
yeah, I think another name I throw out is Unjizuma. I think he was
Okay.
introduced somewhat more recently, um,
Yes.
when Momo was kind of away from Okurun for a while. And yeah, I like the back and forth that they had as well, and him being like the stern faced stoic one compared to everyone else, I think is a nice addition to the increasing cast that we're seeing. I like his addition.
I'll talk more about him when we get to the spoiler section. Him specifically, I like him too. For many of the reasons you say, but yeah, we'll talk more about him. My last one is actually a pair, but they kind of go together, and that's Peeny Weenie and Chiquitita, the alien father and son. I just think, I think they're really funny and cute. But I actually think that, the depth of the love that the father has for the son is actually sort of really, it feels very real. It has a very kind of a powerful quality to it that, like, this is a parent. He may be an alien, but he has these incredible depth of his love for his kid and what he's willing to do for him. I think that has kind of a real poignance to it. But mostly they're just really, really funny. And his name being a line from an ABBA song and all that, and it being an ABBA song, which they couldn't use in the anime because it would have been too expensive to license it. So I love that pair. They really consistently make me smile, especially in the anime. This is a way the anime um, has really improved on the manga experience. Is Chiquitita always like singing like a theme song whenever he enters the picture, like when he's flying or something. So I mean, I think those two are great. I think those two are really great. All right, let's jump into the spoiler discussion, which we maybe briefly skimmed the surface of here. Um, so first spoiler for me is I have problems with the manga, and we've already touched on this.
Hmm.
I have a problem with the current arc in the manga, which we'll eventually get to, but I think the manga does get repetitive. I think you have a feeling of what I said at the beginning, the kind of monster of the week, myth of the week, sci-fi legend of the week. There is a certain point where I just feel like it all becomes a little bit too much and a little too samey. And Yukinobu has said that one of the things he likes to do is at the end of every arc, he always has the characters sit down and have a meal together because he likes that it's a change of pace and it's kind of like a nice benediction at the end of every story. And I think that's great. I think the anime somehow seems to use that more effectively as a change of pace, as a breather than the manga does. I don't know exactly why that is, but I struggle with the manga now, quite frankly. If it weren't for this, I'm not sure I would still be reading it, to be completely honest with you. And I don't have any issues of that nature with the anime at all, at least not yet. And I know you have some of that too, but you want to elaborate a little bit more on your feelings in that respect.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the exact same page with you. I am really often fatigued with the manga. Sometimes when I'm catching up, I just let chapters build up because there's so much happening, and like I said, everything that the presentation is so much that it becomes nothing. And like you, I long for those moments of pause when the characters can just be with each other. And every time, I kind of have like a similar trajectory with every arc, which is okay, things have settled, it's funny, whatever hijinks are happening are entertaining. 2 chapters later, something appears, a new concept, and I'm like, okay, this can be fun. I'm with it for like 4 or 5 chapters, and then I'm kind of like numb to everything that's happening. And then it wraps up, and it usually wraps up in a way that then changes the status quo slightly, but then you can see the characters all together. So I'm like, oh yeah, this is why I like the series. And it kind of just repeats like that. Mind you,
Yeah,
there are definitely better arcs and there are lesser arcs. Like I think the space arc, which is probably I assume season 3, I think that is actually quite strong. That's a long one, but it's quite
yeah.
substantive. So I don't necessarily have concerns with that one. Like I think of like the typhoon one where like it was crazy what was happening on the page, but like I just wasn't. Sometimes I just felt like I wasn't even registering it.
Well, that
Um,
was basically a Sharknado reference, I think.
Yeah, it was. So
Yeah,
I'm with you. I often long for the moments where there isn't an interruption in the
Yeah,
form of this
slow
new concept.
down.
Yeah. So maybe we actually have different feelings about this current arc. I still early days. I've amnesia is a tricky and often not nice trope. I don't know if I don't think there's anyone who's like, oh hey guys, amnesia is my favorite trope in fiction. Um, I think
Yeah,
it often resets things. It often feels like it's you're just meandering and
it's a
you're
cheat.
it is a cheat. But I will say, I like the one aspect that I like of it so far is that I think Okurin's approach to how he's seeing Momo and how there is still this connection between them, even though there's gaps in the knowledge. I think that gaps in her like knowledge of experience. I think that has been depicted quite well. So it's not fallen into a lot of the traps that I was worried it might. I think if anything, it has helped this arc, when it's going to be resolved, I think will be the nice push that they need for their relationship going forward because I really just need them. Like, come on, guys! It's been 200 something chapters. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
let's make it even more official than they can, which is what I feel like the purpose of this arc will hopefully be. So,
Well, hopefully, but I just feel like it's kind of a lazy way to get there if that is indeed what they're doing. Um, you know, a couple thoughts just generally. You did mention earlier that the incredible level of detail of the artwork just becoming ridiculous, frankly. To the point where I feel like at times it's counterproductive to have that much detail in every chapter. It does it because you want to be able to make people look at something and say, "Wow." And if you make something that would make people say wow like every other freaking page, people are going to stop saying wow at some point. And it that's exhausting almost as much as the pacing and the plotting and all these various monsters of the week and plots of the week is there's just so much to take in on every page. It's the anti-bleach. Bleach is the
yeah,
it's the minimalist backgrounds where he wants you to look at the characters and what they're doing. And
exactly.
and it takes kind of the opposite approach here, which temperamentally I probably favor more, frankly. Is I probably favor Yukinobu's approach more than Kubo's in that sense. Not that I think Kubo is doing a bad thing there, but just for me personally, my taste, I kind of like the heavy detail artworks. Like Bug Ego is another manga that has a very, very incredible level of detail of artwork just about every other page, but that's like a monthly and not even that really. It's like 8 or 9 chapters a year. Otoyome Gatari is another one that comes out like 8 or 9 chapters a year with incredible levels of detail in the artwork, but she's like some kind of a she should be in the Louvre, so she's kind of in another category. Um, so yes, I those two things I think it kind of goes hand in hand. I think he needs to take a step back on the level of detail in the arc once in a while, just to give a little tonal variety. But as far as specifically the current arc, the Amnesia arc, which I don't know if that's the official name, but I don't know what the hell else you would call it. Um, Even if it ends up working, I'm still going to have a problem with it because I just feel like it's almost impossible to write an Amnesia arc that isn't just an author cheat code to get the story where he wants it to go.
Mm.
I also feel like we may be setting up maybe some artificial drama of maybe Zuma, maybe amnesiac Momo developing feelings for Zuma. Um, I'm not saying I see any hard evidence of that, but that would not be a direction that would shock me to see things go at some point. Which I just feel like would be drama manufactured for its own sake.
Sure.
Um, but that may never happen. I'm not criticizing for something that if it doesn't happen, but I'm saying I'm vibing that it could happen, and we all know where it's going to end. There's no real drama here. We know how it's all going to end up. I don't feel a great sense of anything of a lot at being at stake here because I
Sure.
feel like okay, it's an amnesia chapter. We know what's going to happen. We know why it's here in the end. We know how it's going to turn out. I'm not sure I feel like there's a lot of skin in the game here. It's just kind of like, okay, I hope he does it in an entertaining way. I hope he does, I hope it moves the story forward, even if it's not the way I would have chosen to move the story forward. But it's not a favorite. It's just not a favorite turn of events for me. I'm not a big fan.
I do think amnesia works best at the start of a series, as a way to establish the reader and the main
I
character.
agree.
That is the best place to have it. Having it 200 something chapters in is when it starts to feel like a cop out.
No, if I were Yukinobu, I would be exhausted at this point. But we don't see any indications that he is. With his writing and with his art, his instinct is always more is better. How long do you think this can go on? It's incredibly popular, more popular than it's ever been. It's not going to be stopped in any future that I can foresee. From a story standpoint, and just in terms of his stamina, how long do you think this is going to go on?
I feel like we're probably getting something like 300-ish chapters. There was the break, and like the split of the first and second saga, which came at like I think it was chapter 165. So if I want to be smart, I could say 330 around there. That feels like something that could be the case, but also just because it repeats, not that it resets so often. I don't really know how long exactly it could keep going. But yeah, maybe like 2 years, two more years.
I can't point to anything in the story that makes me feel like we're getting close. I don't see any wind down in it at this point. That said, there is an arc to these sorts of things. I would maybe, if I was going to put a number on it, I would guess maybe 350 to 400. Maybe we're like just past the halfway point is my vibe, but I mean, it's hard to say. It also is a sort of series that I don't know why I get this. I can't quantify it with any hard logic, but it's a sort of series I almost feel like it wouldn't shock me if it ended like with no preamble. Like it was not a deal like where we're like one of these mangaka who says, I'm going to be starting the final arc. The final arc will be starting in 6 months. We're going to start the final arc. The final arc has started. We're ongoing. We're in the first section of the final arc. And then 2 years later, it ends. That could happen, but it wouldn't shock me somehow just because everything in Dandadan just seems to be immediate and intense. It wouldn't shock me if it was like, we're reading in the middle of the arc and we get a tweet comes out and says, popular manga Dandadan will end in 4 chapters or something like that. I just feel like that could happen. I'm
Yeah,
not predicting it, but I'm saying it wouldn't shock me if it did.
yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about recommendations, which recommendations for something similar, and there ain't a lot, but this is not necessarily an easy one to go into recommendations. I'm going to go first here. Mine is, in fact, one that I just happened to mention a few minutes ago, and that's Bug Ego by One and Shitara Kiyoto. Everybody knows One at this point, One Punch Man, and his masterpiece, Mob Psycho 100. He has another ongoing serialization, well, that he's co-authoring. He's not known as a great artist himself. He does kind of like web versions of some couple of his manga, and they ended up getting dressed up by more established artists in print form. But Bug Ego, his partner is again Shitara Kiyoto, not someone I was familiar with before this series. Bug Ego is a really interesting series. It has that spark of One's incredible intelligence and ability to draw interesting characters, but the artwork in this thing is absolutely it has an almost MC Escher quality to it. In fact, ironically, the most recent volume cover is based on an Escher painting, and that very much fits the vibe. But he doesn't strictly do surrealism. There's a lot of like super hyper realistic detailed backgrounds and impressionistic stuff. It's all over the map, but it's incredibly detailed. It's a very intense experience to read it with between the art and the really really intellectually dense plot lines and the developments. There's always something. It's different than Dandadan in the way it's intense, but it is very intense because of One. You always have to think hard about what's going on. It's like, oh, he's giving me something to think about. Like every line is like, oh, I have to think about that. and paired with the artwork, which is super detailed, it is a very intense experience, and it does share that with Dandadan, even if the reason it's intense is quite different. So that is my pick here, and it's Bug Ego by One and Shitara Kiyoto. How about you?
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's funny when you say that bug ego makes you think when so you have like moments of pause where you have to actually ponder it. Whereas not to insult Dan to Dan, but I don't necessarily get that feeling with the series. So
No, it's visceral. It's just you feel it.
it's easy breezy, goes right through you, which probably also lends to that numbness of the assault on the senses. I'm going to go for what feels like the logical recommendation, which is Fire Punch by Tatsuki Fujimoto. This is the series that Yukinobu was the assistant for all 8 volumes. And even though I don't think. So I said earlier, I think there's more Fire Punch in Dandadan than there is Chainsaw Man necessarily. Um, but the if you want to know the context of like where he came from, this is the logical place to go. I think Fire Punch is. I think Fujimoto goes into some dark places with this. Um,
So I hear.
Maybe his darkest series in terms of like subject matter, which doesn't really translate as much for Dandadan. But I think this just feels like a recommendation to like understand the connective tissue of where he comes from, and try and like figure out the bits and pieces that do make sense and you can't identify in Dandadan.
Yeah, Fire Punch is an interesting one because I know people who love Chainsaw Man who really actively dislike Fire Punch, who just consider it to be like on some level to be to use a word I've heard used, disgusting. Um,
Yeah,
and
but
I haven't read it. I can't speak to it myself.
and then there are also people who think it is his best work. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it goes up and down. And there is a character in Fire Punch who is often considered Tatsuki Fujimoto's best character,
Hmm.
and I think that might be true as well. Actually, so
Yeah, interesting.
definitely not a series that is boring or expected. I think maybe for the nature that it's his first serialization as well, it has ups and downs, and your
Hmm.
mileage may vary on how high those highs and those lows are.
I would not draw a direct line between Fujimoto and One as a writer, but I do think that there is an intellectual density to Fujimoto's writing, and I think there's an intellectual density to One's writing. That the themes are always about they're always about something. There's always something really substantial going on
Mm,
thematically. And so I don't think that's necessarily true with Dandadan. So it's kind of odd in that sense that we pick two series where that's not the case. But I picked mine because I get that same sense of being overwhelmed by it at times that
sure.
I do with Dandadan, and you because obviously because there's a direct kind of a genetic link there, 8 years worth. But I way back at the beginning of this conversation, an hour ago or whenever it was, I said that there's something tonally that's very, very different about Dandadan than anything Fujimoto writes. It does not have that sense of darkness to it, to me. That even in his brighter moments, there's always kind of a bleakness to Fujimoto. I think you would agree with me.
Mm.
Um,
Like even
and I don't get that with Dandadan. I mean, that bad things happen, but I never feel like he doesn't feel like the good guys will be okay in the end, and shouldn't be okay in the end.
yeah,
I just feel like in that sense, it's very different.
Fujimoto is willing to go places that I don't think Yukinobu Tatsu wants to go, which is fine. I think I also view Chainsaw Man and Dandadan as like the big brother and the little brother. And the little brother is just not. Um, I agree, they're tonally different, and I also do agree that Fujimoto is often. Not even often. Fujimoto is always trying to say something, and I don't know if I get that with Dandadan.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Even
One is, but I don't think Yukinobu is.
I think even like Denji as the main character in Chainsaw Man, I think people undersell. what's happening with his character. Whereas Okarun is like not that deep, but equally just very fun and charming to follow.
Mm. Yep. Okay. It's rating time. Rating out of 100. Some of these have gotten
Hmm.
pretty intense when we've had series we were both championing. One of us was championing, and a lot of tension. And oh, what's he going to score it? What's he going to score it?
This is a bit
Probably less
different.
so here. Since yeah, it is. And I'm going to let you go first this time, Samuel. What's your score with Dandadan?
Okay, my score,
I,
Dandadan, as a manga only reader, judging only the manga.
yeah, I am going to do the same.
Okay, good, fair. I'm going to give it a 72.
Hmm.
I've always kind of been like low 70s on it, and it just jumps around depending on how fatigued I'm feeling with any given arc. And maybe just the fact that this one, I feel slightly more positive than I think I could be. Who knows? It might spiral, and in a couple of weeks' time, I'll be way off. So, yeah, but that's where I am right now.
Yeah, it's lower than I thought you would go, frankly. As you know, I said, if it weren't for bringing myself up to date for the purposes of this episode, I'm not sure I would still be reading it because that
Mm,
was to the degree to which I had grown kind of fatigued with it. And I will say flat out, I would give the anime a higher score than I give the manga. At the same time, because I think there are things that the manga is exceptional at, I have to bump up the score a few points from where I might instinctively want to put it because it does have like more manic energy and more detail and it's so many dynamic side characters who are really larger than life. So I have to go higher than you. But at the same time, I can't shade it higher because of how I feel about the anime, and I can't ignore the things that have kind of led me to sort of drift away from it. So my number is lucky 77. Um,
okay.
I think it's sometimes you get a 77 for a series. It's just kind of really kind of oh, it's a nice series. It's a good series. It does everything pretty well. That's not Dandadan. It's a series that is things that I think are exceptional and things that really kind of get under my skin. And it's just, but on the balance, I go higher than I probably would have normally just because of, like I say, there are things about which I can say it may be the best at doing this of any series that's out there right now, and there aren't that many series that I could say that about anything. So I'm pretty comfortable with 77. And uh, and if you're on the fence, about trying giving it a shot, or maybe you're an anime fan and you're on the fence about reading the manga, I do think you should give the manga a chance because there are things that the manga can do because it's a manga that the anime simply can't. And so I think you should really appreciate Dandadan's uniqueness in its original state because it is completely different in as a manga than it is as an anime, and there's not much else like it. So yes, especially if you like the anime, I think you should give the manga a chance too because it is going to give you something that you're not getting from anybody else. And I think that his peculiar, strange, mad genius does deserve to be appreciated in its original state. You could go see an animal in a zoo, but if you really want to understand what an animal is like, you should go see it in the wild or in its natural habitat. So that's kind of how I feel about, the Dandadan manga. Go to the savannah and see it in its natural habitat. Ugliness and all. So that's my score, 77 for Dandadan. And with that, we come to the end of another exciting episode of My Taste is Better Than Yours. Samu, as always, my sincere thanks for your participation in another fun discussion.
Thank you, likewise. I mean, I don't think we're arguing in which our taste is better. We're kind of on a similar page
Nope,
with this one.
kind of on the same page,
I
yeah.
want, if anything, we're probably lower than the general audience would be. So hopefully we don't offend.
And we still like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do.
But I agree with you. It wouldn't be this popular if its average score isn't higher than, what we're giving it. So but again, in the context, in the big picture, those are pretty good scores,
Yeah.
and we're not going to cover series to the level of detail that we're covering in an hour long episode. We're not going to do that with a series we don't like, quite frankly. So, if it made it this far, unless something weird is going on, you can pretty much assume it's something we both consider to be a very much a worthwhile piece of work. Okay. Thank you very much. As always, Samu, thank you. And everyone, to all of our leaders out there, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for listening on your favorite podcast outlet or YouTube. And if you could comment, if you could subscribe, we would be very, very grateful. And as the bartender said to the snowman as he walked out of the bar, stay frosty.